On this episode of That Was a Show? Hey, have you guys seen the Nutt House?
No, I haven't.
Is that short-lived Mel Brooks show?
Yep. Cold open. We grew up during peak sitcom. Seinfeld, Friends, The Fresh Prince. But those shows were diamonds in the rough. This podcast is not about those diamonds. It's about the rough. Some sitcoms were briefly popular in their time. Some were canceled almost immediately. You probably won't recognize most of these, and you'll ask, that was a show?
That was a show?
The podcast about failed or forgotten sitcoms from the 80s and 90s, starring
Brynn Byrne,
Aaron Yeger,
and Andrew Helmer as Barry.
A Radio Gizmo production.
Hi, Barry. How you doing?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Oh, we're in the middle of, what is this, the winter of our discontent?
Yeah, so, I feel like time has no meaning anymore, so I barely even realized it was time to record another episode.
All right, Aaron, so you've brought us the Nutt House to cover this week. Why don't you tell us about it?
All right, Brynn. In 1989, coming on the heels of the highly successful movie Spaceballs, which of course spoofed Star Wars, Mel Brooks co-created a sitcom called The Nutt House. This show attempts to port a similar style of farcical satire to the small screen. The Nutt House is about a big, lavish hotel in New York City owned by the Nutt family. The hotel has been struggling financially for a long time, is mostly without guests, and has fallen into disrepair. It's owned by the elderly widow of its founder, Edwina Nutt, played by Cloris Leachman, and managed by Reginald Tarkington, played by Harvey Korman, who takes
Great name.
Yeah, it is a great name. Who takes much of the blame for the sad state of affairs. The head of housekeeping is Ms. Frick, also played by Leachman, in a similar vein as her character Frau Blucher from Brooks' Young Frankenstein. We also meet Sally Lonanek, Edwina's personal secretary, played by Molly Hagan. The show ran on NBC from September 20th, 1989 to October 25th, 1989. It's a single-cam show and just as visually complex as any theatrical feature comedy of the time. In spite of these impressive production values, 11 episodes were produced, and it was canceled after only 5 had aired. I chose this show because I thought it fit nicely with this niche of Sports Night and the John Larroquette Show, kind of capping off our trio of genre-bending sitcoms. I generally always liked Mel Brooks, and even though it didn't last long, I still had really high hopes that this might be some sort of hidden gem, which would not be without precedent, because Police Squad, which I enjoyed a lot as a kid, only lasted 6 episodes and spawned the highly successful Naked Gun series of movies. And it inspired countless others. And I was a huge fan of those, along with Airplane and pretty much everything in this style. When I was a kid, I loved all absurd spoof comedies like this.
I think we should cover Police Squad in the future, by the way.
That'd be fun.
That would be fun.
That'd be a lot of fun, yeah.
I guess I should describe what happens in the pilot.
Go for it.
This series begins with a double-episode pilot. We learn that the Nutt House Hotel is on the verge of financial ruin, and poor management is possibly to blame. Big Jake Herder is the Texan boss of the powerful Texplex hotel chain, played by David Huddleston, who would go on to play another Big a few years later, Lebowski. He's obsessed with buying the Nutt House to add to his massive hotel chain. Big Jake sends his assistant Shrike, played by John Delancey, to New York to purchase the Nutt House with the instruction to not take no for an answer. Shrike discovers manager Reginald Tarkington has been falsifying records and lied about some 600 current guests. He tries to leverage this into blackmailing them into selling the hotel. Edwina Nutt brings in her grandson Charles Nutt III, played by Brian McNamara, and makes him a co-owner of the hotel, hoping that with his help, they can save the hotel from being taken over, and as such, the family legacy or whatever. Charles Nutt III is a young trust fund playboy. He saves the hotel by booking a conference of Swedish masseuses, sigh, And this triumphant conclusion isn't without the additional payoff of Charles and Sally having their first kiss. You see, they fell in love at first sight solely based on eye contact, or perhaps due to his all-white leisure suit. So, yeah.
Yeah, I have to say he was a walking trope. That whole idea of a trust fund, very, very privileged young guy who rises to the occasion. It's like, is that really an arc anyone really needs? But apparently it was back in the 80s because it was everywhere. And he was like literally wearing a white like leisure suit or Miami Vice style suit. Like
Miami
he was
Vice.
like
That's what it is, yeah.
But well, was that a cliche? I guess it is in today's lens, but
No. By 89, it was absolutely a cliche already. We were at the end of that decade. We'd seen this a million times.
Yeah.
He's very likable in it, though.
I mean, he is. Yeah, you don't hate him, but it's still just kind of like eye roll.
Eye roll. Speaking of eye rolls, I mean, the sight gags like the gold Rolex and the Disneyland clock. It's very Airplane. The woman stuck in the phone booth. Again, very typical of this 80s style of spoof comedy.
Yeah, but I mean, not Airplane. I mean, these are Brooks jokes. Man.
Yeah.
These are Mel Brooks jokes.
They are Mel Brooks jokes, but they're also Zucker Brothers jokes.
Airplane wishes they were Mel Brooks jokes.
Well, they were in a sense in the 80s, in the 70s and 80s. Playing on the same field.
They're a similar ilk, but I mean, these are Mel Brooks jokes, like through and through, man.
Yeah.
That Rolex joke that doesn't get more Mel Brooksy than that.
Oh, they are. I mean, they're Mel Brooks jokes. I'm not saying Mel Brooks got them from anyone else. I'm just saying that, like, in the 80s, the Zucker brothers were really coming into their own as people who were, like, doing big things with this style of comedy. Mm-hmm. And I think Mel Brooks, so to give a little context here, his previous project was Spaceballs a couple years prior to this show. And that was, in a sense, a very similar style of humor, but a very high concept, extremely high concept spoof of Star Wars, where, we know exactly why the comedy works because there's a very particular context to what's being spoofed.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I used to love movies like Airplane and Naked Gun, and I loved The Police Squad. I loved Mel Brooks movies. I loved Young Frankenstein or Frankenstein. So I had very high hopes for this. And at some point I wrote down, I'm 10 minutes in and I still haven't laughed. So I guess my first question is to pose to each of you. Did you find this funny?
I would say that I did for the first 5 minutes. Like there were a couple of jokes that kind of like they're silly. They're undoubtedly silly, but there were a couple of jokes that got me right off the bat. I don't know what the exact line is, but he's, the narrator is listing the types of people that have stayed at the hotel, and he's listing impressive people, and then he says, and dental hygienists, and I thought it was like, a good, like, little non sequitur. So I did laugh, like, a little, I had chuckles, but then after 5 minutes, I was like, all right, well, they just keep coming. And after a while, it was like, okay, like, I was desensitized to it. But yeah, I definitely, I do like non sequitur jokes in general and silly gags. I really laughed at the train bit.
I only wish the train bit was even more over the top. Like,
that's true.
I was full on ready for it to just be a train. Like, I was like, there's a train crossing in this. There's a train crossing in the hotel. I was there for it, and I was almost disappointed when it was just a bunch of like carts going by. Just to explain, it's basically a series of hotel carts. The ones that serve
room service.
All in a row going by for an extended amount of time, and they kind of set it up that it's like a train crossing, and Sally is really exasperated because, they didn't make it before this series of carts went by, so they have to wait for it to pass. So it was kind of a cute gag, but you guys thought it would be better if it were actually a train, like taking it further with the absurdity.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the hotel was built over train tracks.
Yeah.
That's exactly
would have killed me.
That's 100% what I was expecting when they said that. I thought, oh, I'm going to see like a freight train burst past this door. And the joke is that the hotel was for some reason built right next to some train tracks.
Right.
Mind you, how expensive a sight gag is that?
Yeah, that would be really, I think the problem is it's kind of, so it's a low concept show, right? So it's hard to go really hard with the absurdity. So they kind of just like take it only so far, and the sight gags are more just like reaching jokes. Like there's the sign that says hotel records and compact discs and cassettes.
I wrote that one down too.
Oh, that's such a Brooks.
Yeah.
I loved it.
It is, but it's just, and I get it, like records are also called vinyl records, but it's just, I don't know.
My favorite sight gag in the entire thing is the 10,000 gallon hat on top of the Texas like building. I died laughing because it's just, I didn't realize how much I missed Mel Brooks humor.
Yeah. I have to admit, I didn't know this show existed before you brought it to me, Aaron. I really had no idea. And usually I at least vaguely know about a lot of these shows, but I had no idea what it was. And when you told me it was called the Nutt House, I was instantly cringing. I thought that, you know, it was some sort of story set in a psychiatric hospital or psychiatric institution. And I was like really bracing myself for some sort of really inappropriate and problematic thing, but it's really just like a dumb joke. Like their last name is Nutt.
But I'm glad you mentioned that specific sight gag of the hotel records and cassettes and compact discs, because I wrote that one down. That's the kind of joke that I've laughed at 1,000 times before in movies and other contexts where this style of humor has been done. And it didn't get me this time. I didn't find any of this funny, but on some sort of intellectual level, I found that very frustrating because I've always enjoyed this humor so much that I was really grappling with trying to understand why it wasn't working for me here. And eventually I figured out why, but I'm going to kind of bury that lead for later in the episode
Fair enough.
So that we can just discuss this organically.
Yeah. Watching it, I was more fond of it than I was definitely expecting, but watching it, I was like, there's no way Brynn and Aaron like this. Because let's put it this way, like, it's outside of Young Frankenstein, Brooks stuff does not hold up to a critical lens. Pure. Yeah. Spaceballs is very, very funny, but it is so stupid and, you know, offensive and, you know, all that. And like, they don't hold up to critical lenses.
I mean, watching this, it did make me want to rewatch other old Mel Brooks movies like Robin Hood Men in Tights and Dracula Dead and Loving It. But I'm sure if I watched them, I'd be like, oh boy.
They're both, well, and that's the thing is those came out when we were young.
Yeah.
Those are both complete dud movies.
Yeah.
Duds.
I remember laughing so hard at Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Well, I think the thing is that this style of comedy, I don't know if it's derived from like a vaudevillian tradition, this kind of really absurd, farcical humor, but it's always of its time. Like it's not character humor. It's not like invest in these people humor. It's almost like one-off jokes that are going to catch you by surprise. And it's sort of its time, even when it works well. So I think that some of the most successful movies that we remember as being really successful in this style, they were parodying or spoofing a particular other super successful movie or TV series from their time and doing so with a style of humor that would have been like edgy or surprising at the time and likely isn't going to hold up because our standards as a society evolve as they should. So one example is a running joke that comes over and over and over in this. The character Ms. Frick, there's this joke that keeps happening over and over of Miss versus Ms. Yeah. And it's almost like all the other characters find the idea that she would go by Ms. as so incredibly odd and novel. It's like, yes, we get it. It's the 80s. you found women using the word Ms. to be weird because that's the kind of men you are. Like, that joke doesn't work anymore. Like, not only is it problematic, it's not funny.
Yeah, I just wanted to circle back to your point about the one-off jokes and how there's so many non sequiturs, which we've already mentioned. But to me, this is maybe the first version of this that didn't maybe make us all laugh as much as more current versions of this do. Like, I'm thinking Arrested Development had a lot of like random non sequiturs. And so did like a variety of Tina Fey projects like 30 Rock and The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. They do a lot of those like random.
Yes, they do. Yeah. And I think what they do well, the same way that other films from Mel Brooks, for instance, did this well, is that they are non sequiturs, but they are still bouncing off of a particular character or plot anchor where there's some sort of context. They are non sequiturs, but they are playing within certain boundaries that make them funny because...
But maybe not in the pilots. Yeah. Maybe not in the pilots. In the pilots, you're still finding your characters.
Yeah, you're
right?
still figuring it all out.
Yeah.
Like,
can't be
let's
perfect.
Put it this way. Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, I love, has a super problematic as fuck pilot.
Yeah.
Like, so you're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
Right?
I think like all of those shows, they don't rely on the non sequitur and the farcical humor. They want you to fall in love with the characters, and the non sequiturs are what they're supposed to be, a non sequitur. They're not the thing. They are like a fun divergence.
I think there's characters here. Characters that might be able to grow a bit over the course. There's still always going to be weird non sequitur humor in this show, but there's undeniably there's a couple of characters.
There are. I don't know. I just felt like the way that the time was being invested in the pilot, it felt like it really did feel like a movie.
Oh, and absolutely.
And I'm going to come back to that later when we talk about how it ends, but yeah, it just the whole time it feels like kind of like when we were talking about Sports Night and we discovered that it felt like Sorkin probably wanted to make a 1-hour drama like The West Wing. And for whatever circumstances, for whatever reasons, that was squeezed into the clothing of a sitcom. This feels like Mel Brooks just wanted to make a movie. And somehow it got squeezed into the apparatus of a sitcom. Everything from the way it's shot to the way characters are introduced, the set pieces, the like editing style, the musical score. It's all movie.
Absolutely.
I'd love to talk about the fact that there were so many things in the 80s and 90s, whether they're films or television shows, that revolve around a New York hotel.
That's true.
Like, I feel like that's a trope. And there's this weird fascination with it about the inner workings of a hotel.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's funny because I, again, had no idea that it was actually set in a hotel and was very confused when it started.
Really great big hotel set, too.
Yeah, it was. But it was definitely sort of retro. Like, it didn't have any... It was not a modern 1980s feel. It was definitely an old school...
Yeah.
Not conservative, but like a standard, old-fashioned...
Conventionally expensive-looking hotel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, credit where credit is due. This many sets, this many pratfalls.
Yeah, for sure.
This cinematography, this cast. I mean... This really was swinging for the fences and trying to turn this style of humor into an episodic thing in a unique way. Like, they really went all out.
And my God, those elevator sequences.
Yeah.
The stunt work for those.
Yeah. Like, those elevator sequences probably cost as much as the budget of the average sitcom at the time, just to make that work.
And they are very anxiety inducing, at least for me. The fact that they're almost getting cut in half by elevators is like terrifying.
Yeah, because the elevator operator is both near and far-sighted, depending on the scene.
Yeah.
Again, like, I've been overly fond of this show, mostly to be contrarian. I mean, this is a very, very dumb show. It's very dumb. Like, 80% of it doesn't work. Like, the elevator operator character is so stupid and it doesn't work at all, but whatever.
No, that's good. I want you to be contrarian or to like elements of this show because I think that part of the way I'm reacting to it is almost like when we talked about the John Larroquette show, I went into that with super low expectations because of my absolutely false memories of what kind of show it was. So I was expecting it to be really silly, really dumb, total failure. And I was completely put in my place, not only by like the facts of what actually happened, but that I enjoyed it, that there were, it wasn't without some problems, but there were a lot of elements of that show that worked really well, both the way it was initially created and even after it was retooled. Like both versions of that show, I was pleasantly surprised with how well I thought they worked. And with this, I think I went in with really high expectations of this is going to be like when I was 12 and watching Police Squad for the first time, and I'm going to be rolling on the floor laughing. And when that didn't happen, I was just so disappointed.
See, I assumed this was going to be a complete train wreck. Like, I was like, there's no way that this is in any way going to be good. I mean, Mel Brooks's involvement was not, like, for me, like, I was thinking, like, this is going to be Mel Brooks, like Brynn mentioned, Dracula Dead and Loving It, or Robin Hood Men in Tights, where, like, basically this was past his prime Mel Brooks, who was just rough jokes. And I was kind of surprised. And like, I was very much like that for the first few minutes. I mean, like, I got a few chuckles at the, lifestyles of the rich and famous style narration. But like, when I was like a couple of minutes in, I was like, oh, this is all right.
Yeah.
This is okay. I mean, as bad as it is, like, especially with like how kind of, I hate using the word cringy, but how cringy. Some of the jokes around Miss Frick were like, I'm sorry, I was just completely there for them because it's fucking Cloris Leachman.
Yeah, she's so
nailing it.
She's so funny. Doesn't matter what she does.
Yeah.
And I also appreciated the very, very specific pop culture references that were part of the, one-off jokes. I don't know if you guys caught the little thing in the scene between Sally and Charles. It was the point where they're kind of admitting that they like each other, and Sally goes, "You like me. You really like me." And then he goes, "I do, Sally." Do you guys know what that's a reference to?
Yeah, now I do. Sally Field's acceptance speech.
Yeah, Sally Field's 1984 acceptance speech for the Oscars.
All right, I mean that's an impressive reference. And I didn't catch that.
I think that
I caught the "you like me," but I missed that her name was Sally and that it was one step further of a joke. Like I caught that she referenced that, but
he's like, "I do, Sally."
How many jokes after 1984 revolved around "you like me, you really like me"?
I don't know.
Oh my god, a lot.
Yeah, like so many. That was such a big pop culture phenomenon. It was like almost as big as "Where's the Beef?"
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, "Where's the Beef?" Now we're talking a lot about the jokes and the gags and the non sequiturs, but just to speak very briefly about the actual plot of this episode. Not that there's that much to say about it, but it is a suitably typical, pretty low-key, low-concept sitcom story from the time.
Yeah, it's an 80s story. It's we gotta save our business against the rich fat cats.
Yeah, except they're also rich fat cats that are just struggling now.
Yeah,
and I think that was why the plot of this pilot didn't quite work for me, because the basic premise that they're desperately trying to avoid selling the hotel to this rich Texan who has this successful hotel chain. I'm like, you all seem miserable. None of you seem to want to run this hotel. You don't know how to run this hotel. It's a massive hotel. And it feels like this hotel is just bleeding you dry. You made a bunch of money in the past. The grandson is like this rich playboy who's living off of a trust fund. It feels like, they should really just bail and sell the hotel.
Yeah.
At one point they actually do say rich businessmen are trying to buy the hotel. And I was like, I loved how on the nose it was.
Yeah.
Rich businessmen are coming to buy the hotel.
Yeah.
The
on the nose generic level of that, and the fact that it was like this Texan with the spittoon and everything, that's funny.
With sunflower seeds.
Sunflower seeds.
Yeah.
But it made me think of The Golden Palace, the show that we talked about recently, because, they just
another hotel show.
But they just bought a hotel.
Not Manhattan, but
No, yeah. No. They that premise made sense to me. Like, I mean, it didn't, but it did. Or like, I should say, it made sense to me why I should find it charming, because they don't have experience running a hotel. They bought somebody else's failed hotel and they're trying to find a way to make it work. And it's like, this is the opposite. These are the people who should be selling this hotel to someone else who gets to be the star of the show who tries to make it work.
I think that's part of the joke is like, it's the 80s style joke of we got to save ourselves against the other rich businessmen.
Yeah.
But they're rich and they own a hotel and they're old money, which I think I think that's part of the joke. I think it's supposed to be ironic that they're the ones trying to defend themselves against somebody richer, basically.
I guess so. Yeah. I guess I just don't find that to be something that's gonna maybe hold up for 100 episodes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's more questionable as to why the hotel staff are so invested.
Yeah, like if outside of they'd be fine.
Yeah, and they imply that they're all severely underpaid and being exploited.
Yeah. Like, well, what is their loyalty to this place? They should want new ownership.
Yeah.
The Nutt family is doing a terrible job running this hotel.
Like the hotel manager you get because he's worried about like being caught for like years and years of
fraud.
Of fraudulent bookkeeping.
Yes.
Yeah. But like if the hotel, because clearly the hotel chain's going to come in and keep it as a hotel and honestly probably keep most of the staff, they're probably all going to be fine except for him.
Yeah.
And the Nuts are going to be fine because they're going to sell it.
Yeah.
There was the doorman who, I guess there's a joke right at the beginning where they reference the fact that he's not even paid a paycheck. He just like works there for room and board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Ms. Frick also references the fact that she lives there or it's her room or something. And it's like,
they all live there.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Is that a thing? Do hotel workers sometimes live at...
I would say not anymore at all.
Yeah, maybe that was an old thing.
At least from the way what media tells me. In the past, at some point, if you owned a hotel, you lived in the hotel, I guess. And if you worked in the hotel, I suppose you worked in the hotel as well.
It's conceivably plausible that they would all just be living there.
Owners definitely would have something in a one-off hotel. I don't know. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah. We're not authorities on this.
No.
The other thing that happens is that occasionally it bounces into a space where it feels like it's trying to have sincere moments, particularly between the grandmother who owns the hotel and her grandson who is taking over partial ownership of it. And there are these moments between the two of them, especially late in the episode, where it feels like they're trying to achieve some sort of like touching moment of sincerity that in a parody style comedy can work really well when it's played for irony, to have a real like melodrama moment. Again, not to keep bringing it up, but the movie Airplane did that really well. And in this case, it doesn't feel quite like they're playing it for irony. It feels like they're playing it the way that a lot of sitcoms try to have moments of genuine sincerity.
Yeah.
Just because we've been binging on a lot of it, I'll say The Office is an example of a show that does that extremely well. And it feels like...
The Office US.
The Office US does that extremely well. And it feels like there are a number of moments in this show where they try to do that. And it just feels like I'm not on board for this touching moment. I don't care.
But I mean, you weren't on board. So,
yeah.
I mean, they were fine as fine as little character moments go. They were fine. I mean,
you know why I feel like they're not? Because of the white face makeup. Actually, I should explain this. So for anyone who hasn't seen this.
Yeah.
So Edwina Nutt, the elderly woman who owns the hotel, is one of the two characters played by Cloris Leachman. In this character, she's like bent over with a hunch, and she's this really frail elderly woman who appears to be perhaps like 90. and
I would say she's supposed to be well over 100.
Yeah, over 100.
An exaggerated Mr. Burns type.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Female Mr. Burns.
Yeah, female Mr. Burns, incredibly frail and like bleached white face makeup, like white as a sheet of paper. Most of the scenes with her are like nauseating in how cringy they are, in like the denture thing, and like it's kind of like
there's a lot of body. There's a lot of body humor.
Yeah, there's a lot of gross
moments.
Yeah,
and it's
which is very inherently like ageist now.
Yeah,
but back then, it's
is ageist and has its problems for that reason.
Yeah,
but I guess also it's like for the bulk of the scenes with her, it has that tone. And then suddenly it tries to take a hard turn into these sincere moments with the grandson. And I'm like, I can't, with that face makeup, I can't take this seriously. I can't.
Yeah, I found that kind of amusing, actually. I was like, I actually was like, I can't believe this is the character they're going to try to humanize a little. Like, that's why I kind of liked it. I was like, wow, okay. Because of how ridiculous it was, I was like, right on.
Yeah.
Loves her grandson, just wants the best for him.
We already mentioned a few of the tropes. This is a very, very tropey show. You know, you got the New York hotels, you've got the young, irresponsible playboy that everybody underestimates, but he ends up being the hero. And you also have some other kind of common tropes from the time. The antagonist, which is also not the main antagonist, but sort of the henchman that gets beat up the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Which is the character.
Himself.
Yeah. The Norman Shrike character is the main assistant to the Texas billionaire, and he keeps like just getting hurt and just going through like awful things throughout the episode. And this is something that we've seen in so much comedy from the 80s and 90s.
Much more in movies.
Yeah, I would say
but yeah.
for sure. Like I think about in Tommy Boy, Rob Lowe's character keeps getting
Sorry, guys. She said a button for me, which is just saying the words Tommy Boy makes me laugh.
You know what? When we first started talking about the trust fund Playboy character, my mind went to, I wish this was Rob Lowe.
Oh, I was going to say because...
My mind goes there a lot.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he would be much more fun to watch. But actually, the Tommy Boy connection is also there because that's basically what... Chris Farley's character is in that movie, but he's more of a bumbling, trust fund kid who saves the day.
Yeah. Shrike is great though. Like he's game. Like oh God, Aaron, what's the actor name again?
John Delancey.
John Delancey is great. I mean, he almost always is great, but like he plays this antagonist role very well.
Yeah. One
really great, just stupid joke about like his name where he's like, you look at me like I'm a Nazi. And then he's like, like I'm a father. I have 2 kids, and my wife is currently working on the third third strike. The third strike. And I was just like, oh, that's so dumb, but I loved it.
That's such a classic Mel Brooks joke.
Yeah.
Another trope is, of course, the really young, attractive women who are literally there as props to,
the Swedish girls.
Yeah, the Swedish girls in this case.
Specifically, Swedish twins.
It is.
Swedish twins are a trope.
It's always Swedish twins with mall bangs, and they are like, they don't say a word, and they're just like all over a male character.
Yes. There's two sets of that specific type in this episode.
Yeah, in the Texas, the Texas. There's a cutaway where they're on the phone, and the Texas oil guy or whatever the hell he is. He has 2 of these women just like randomly in the room with him.
Oh yeah,
and
forgot about that scene.
And I think in the credits, I noticed they were credited as Bimbo 1 and Bimbo 2.
Oh,
yep.
God.
I didn't have to look to be like, I bet they were credited as Bimbo 1 and Bimbo 2. That was, oh man. I like how you're like, I don't know, Texas oil man. And I was like, yeah, I think he was a Texas oil man. Before my brain went, oh right, he's a guy who owns a hotel chain.
Yeah.
But it might as well be oil.
Yeah. I mean,
like
a Texas...
That's just the... Yeah. He's that character.
A Texas businessman is a trope
I mean,
as well.
he wears spurs.
Yeah.
He wears spurs. Yeah.
All right.
I'll add a trope that we've talked about before because I watched episode 3. I'll explain a little more why later, but it features yet again the bizarre way that comedies at the time would talk about Japanese people as this novelty of America.
No, we've come across like what 2-3 times.
Yeah, it's really a problem.
It feels like almost every show in the 80s had to have at least one episode that would make jokes about Japanese people.
Americans were very scared of Japanese businessmen entering into their lives. It was a fear for some reason.
It's one of the reasons why that episode died on the table for me. I found the pacing of this somehow both slow and relentless at the same time. I don't know.
I get that. I get that.
Yeah, I don't know how to explain it better than that. There was something about the jokes coming fast and constantly, and yet edited in a way that felt slow and leaving space for a laugh track that did not need to be there because
it's a single camera show, not shot in front of an audience, and much like Sports Night, couple scenes, there's a little laugh track just kind of just shimmied in there.
Wedged in there.
Yeah. Just jammed in there. There's a line that I had to note because it's the kind of thing that would normally split my sides. I'm a ne'er-do-well. The only thing I do well is nair. And
I missed that. That's great.
I find it funnier reading
Charles says that.
Charles says it.
Yeah.
I find it funnier reading it back now than I did when I watched it in the show, the way it was delivered. Because
I missed it. So
I'm normally a huge sucker for that kind of like wordplay joke. And I'm definitely guilty of making jokes like that all the time.
Yeah.
But in the way that it was delivered in this show, I didn't find it funny. I feel like that's the kind of joke that works well in a sitcom when it's like a quick little quip between friends, like a little self-deprecating moment that's in passing, like something that Chandler Bing would say while sitting on the couch in the coffee shop. Boom, and it's done. Not something with like a dramatic buildup, camera dollies into a tight close, like not something where you're making a meal out of it or like treating it as this is a moment. It's more just like, that's just a little thing from riffing. There's something about the delivery of it that I think...
Yeah, like if I missed it, like, you reading it out, I was like, that's great. I missed it, so clearly it was not delivered well.
I think part of it is the actor, and nothing against Brian McNamara. Like, he's a talented guy. I just think there's something about his presence that wasn't silly enough, you know? Like, he was too cool and too, handsome.
He's a Michael Bluth, or he's an early Michael Bluth. He's a Michael Bluth before Michael Bluth goes down the like real asshole like path, but where like he's almost too straight sometimes.
Yes. He's the Michael Bluth, but they're giving him Job jokes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
That's a great Job joke.
Yeah. He's not silly enough. And that role, I feel personally, did call for more silly. It should have been more of a cartoon, Yeah,
they're the characters that are supposed to be hard edge. Ms. Frick is supposed to be, like, the thing is that she's dramatic and intense and hard edged, but he should have been silly.
Yeah.
And there's a reoccurring gag with him, how he can't drink champagne or he goes over but we never see it.
Yeah.
They just keep referencing that he gets ridiculous when he drinks champagne. We never see it, except he's introduced and he says it and they keep hitting on it like, oh, don't give him champagne or he'll get really he'll get silly. And I'm like, well, good.
Yeah, exactly. You're expecting the convention of like 30 Rock where they cut away to a scene where he's like on steals a motorcycle and he's got like, it's completely absurd.
Yes,
like you're showing that moment.
The pilot would have actually been elevated by having the scene of him and Shrike drunk together.
Yeah.
Because it would have given both of them more to play with.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe they filmed it and then just cut it. I don't know.
They're like, oh, shit, we're already at 48 minutes for this 22-minute pilot.
You're totally right. That's the scene that was missing. And yet they spent so much time on gags of like a suitcase ripping in half and the panties go flying out, or cutting back to the elevator 25 times. And it's like they spent a lot of time and a lot of money shooting some really like impressive gags. And the couple things that we needed to see where we could have like really dug into those characters deeper, that's what was missing.
Agreed.
The ending of the pilot, it's this huge set piece type of ending with this big triumphant conclusion, the orchestral score, the massive number of Swedish masseuse conventioners coming into the hotel, flooding into the lobby, and the Texan shooting his gun, and the kiss, and the big dramatic triumphant conclusion to what feels like the ending of a feature film, not the setup of a series.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It does feel like that way. It does feel like a typical 80s comedy that's starring like Michael Keaton or Steve
great.
Gutenberg,
less great.
Yeah.
So the end gag of the episode is they all are, they're celebrating, the hotel's not going to be sold. So they're all walking up to they're walking up to the elevator. They're going to go up to the roof to celebrate, and they walk in and everything's black. And did anybody else keep waiting for it to turn into like a Looney Tunes gag and them all? Because I kept waiting for them to just fall.
Yeah.
They were standing too long in midair, and the gag was going to be they were going to fall. But it turns out it was like they're standing on top of the elevator.
Yeah.
But I kept waiting for the Looney Tunes moment where they drop, they just drop out. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. That definitely came to mind a little bit, but it was like that.
With a cartoon sound effect. And
yeah, because it's not like there weren't cartoon sound effects everywhere else, and it's not like they didn't have the bucking bronco thing in the Texans boardroom, and all sorts of other big sight gags where people fly across the room and crash into something.
And literally, the opening theme song is a cartoon sequence. So
yeah. Still trying to grapple with why I'm just not quite finding it as funny as I used to. One of my notes is just questioning, do I just not find this kind of humor as funny now as I did when I was a kid? I think about this suing Sally scene where the staff of the hotel all scramble to get ready for this elderly woman who's about to try to fake a trip and fall accident to be able to sue the hotel, which is apparently something that she does all the time. And so it's like a crane shot. There's maybe 100 background performers. It's a massive set piece scene. They make a 3-course meal with dessert out of this joke. And she dives, swan dives off the top of this massive flight of stairs where a whole bunch of people can catch her. And she's got this ongoing thing, I'll get you next time sort of thing.
She says, I'll sue you later.
I'll sue you later. And I think that scene kind of epitomizes why it didn't work for me in this show. I don't know if either of you remember from Cheers, there's this character who's a grifter who kind of comes and goes sometimes and tries to rip people off.
Oh, yeah.
And Sam Malone knows who he is, and he'll try to come in and have a different mark each time. And they're always just trying to deal with this guy. But it's kept pretty low key, but it's pretty funny. And so I feel like the way that this suing Sally thing plays out as a lavish theatrical scene feels like it's not even trying to work for a sitcom world. It's not even trying to create something that would be a touch point for repeating jokes over time or something episodic.
Hard disagree. Loved it. I my favorite thing about it is I love that everybody is in on it. It's not only is the hotel, the entire staff ready and they know that they have to catch her, but she knows that they're gonna catch her, and she enjoys the cat and mouse of it all too. And it's one of my favorite jokes in the pilot.
That's a really good point, though. I think the cat and mouse thing of it is clever.
Yeah, I think she was going to reoccur, and I think it was going to be a thing where she keeps coming up with schemes and they keep foiling her. And I think it's funny that it isn't the plot, like that it's just part of their day. Like it's like taking out the garbage. They're like, oh, make sure you catch suing Sally this time.
Well, anyone who's worked in any sort of public-facing job has those regular customers that come in and out, or clients, they come in and they, have a shtick.
That's what it was. That's exactly it.
I've worked in bank branches around Toronto, and that's a thing.
Well, and Brynn and I years ago worked together at a coffee shop, and we had so many clients that were identified just by like whatever cuckoo names we came up with, who tried to pull the same shit all the time, and you'd be like, you get her this time.
Yeah, you deal with them.
Well, I think that's a really good point. I agree with both of you that I think that could work really well. I think what I'm bumping on is less about the construct of that character, more on a visual style level. Mm-hmm. It's more the apparatus that I was bumping on. It's the way it was shot. Like it's the way that it plays out in a very theatrical scene sort of way. Whereas I would have enjoyed that same thing happening in a much more low-key, sitcom-y way. Whereas this felt just a little too grand. Sitcoms live in the comedy of small observations and asides. And I would have loved to see this show just sort of merge the two instead of trying to like make things bigger than they need to be.
All right, guys. So I guess it's that time again for 6 Degrees of Friends.
All right, what do you have for us, Brynn?
Yeah, so it was quite connected to Friends, I'm not going to lie. The Nutt House is separated from the iconic sitcom Friends by 1 degree.
Oh.
Delancey?
Molly Hagan actually guest starred on Friends.
Oh.
Which one was Molly Hagan?
It was Sally.
Sally. Oh.
Yeah. And also Gregory Itzin, who plays Dennis, also guest starred on Friends and was in 2 episodes. He played Phoebe Buffay, of all people. He played her father-in-law.
Oh.
So, so Paul Rudd's dad.
He was the Nixon-esque president on 24.
Oh.
Yeah. And then there's even another additional Phoebe Buffay connection, if you're willing to hear it.
Born ready.
I guess so.
So through Brian McNamara, who played Charles Nutt III on The Nutt House, he guest starred on Mad About You. Mm-hmm. So it's Mad About You, Phoebe Buffay combination.
Well, you've been banned from using that, but you did warn us.
I did warn you, and you let me go ahead. So, but it's a loose one because we don't know if those 2 characters appeared in the same episode.
I don't think we ever really looked that far. I don't know if any of our connections ever appear in the same episodes.
So basically, there's 2 1-degree connections.
Right on.
All right, Brynn, what about the spinoff?
Well, the short answer is everyone that starred and that worked on this show went on to do bigger and better things and continued to have really great careers spanning several decades, including Mel Brooks, who is still working. I saw an IMDb credit for this year.
He was a voice in Toy Story 4 last year.
Yeah,
too.
So he's done a lot of voice acting, and he continues to write and produce. And, he's like living his best life.
He'd be 95 this year.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
My favorite thing is him playing himself on Curb Your Enthusiasm.
I was just going to say, his season of Curb is exceptional.
Yeah. And all the bits, there's that episode of Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee where it's him and Carl Reiner and talking about how they have dinner together every night. It's like the most adorable thing I've ever seen. It's so charming.
It's such a sweet moment.
Yeah, and honestly, it was very fun going through and doing this segment for all of these people because they have some fun credits. I'll start with Molly Hagan. So she's done a ton of television and movies. She's very recognizable. She's not really a household name, but you've seen her and stuff. She was actually in Herman's Head, which is a show that everybody's been requesting us to cover eventually. She also played Matthew Broderick's character's wife in Election. And you guys will be excited about this one. She played Sister Roberta in the Seinfeld episode
Oh my God.
That's what it was.
The Latvian Orthodox episode.
No, I knew she was in Seinfeld, but I couldn't remember which character.
So she plays...
There she is.
Sister Roberta.
So the woman who...
I brought you another toy I thought you would enjoy.
The Kavorka.
The Kavorka episode. So she abandons her vow to the church because she's seduced by Kramer's Kavorka, his
animal
his sexual
magnetism.
Magnetism.
Yeah.
That he has, the mysterious magnetism that no one really understands.
I understand it.
Yeah. Brian McNamara also has done a ton of TV, and I threw in this one credit for you, Barry. He was in 3 episodes of The OC. Yeah. Harvey Korman was already pretty legendary, and he worked again with Mel Brooks on Dracula Dead and Loving It, and did a ton of voice acting. Gregory Itzin, who plays Dennis in The Nutt House, went on to do many films and television roles, including roles in 24 and Big Love. And an interesting little tidbit is that both Brian McNamara and Gregory Itzin were both in that really bad Lindsay Lohan movie, I Know Who Killed Me.
Awesome.
Which
That's
I found
great.
very amusing. And I'm like, is there some weird Mel Brooks connection to that movie? But I couldn't really find one. I just thought it was funny because that's a very infamous movie.
If you told me Mel Brooks had written and directed I Know Who Killed Me, it would make a lot more sense. I was like, oh, I missed the joke.
Yeah. And we would be remiss if we didn't discuss the great Cloris Leachman, who, of course, played 2 roles in The Nutt House. She actually passed away just this week. She's done so many films and television and just an incredible talent that we'll remember for decades to come. Like, she can be a dramatic actor. She can be a comedic actor. She took her craft to so many amazing levels, like from her film roles in The Last Picture Show to, even the little one-off uncredited roles in Bad Santa. She plays the grandmother.
Yeah.
She's just an incredible performer, and I'll look forward to rewatching all of her stuff. I'm currently actually, just out of sheer coincidence, starting this binge on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and so she's one of the co-stars of the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and had her own spin-off of that series called Phyllis. So I'm gonna have to dive into both of those series further. I also really loved her in Spanglish. I think that's an underrated.
That's what I always remember that joke of her. It's 11 o'clock somewhere, and then she points at the clock, and it turns over to 11, and she grabs the glass of wine.
Yeah. So rest in peace, Cloris Leachman. We'll always remember your incredible body of work.
Yeah, just watching her in this, just really, just after hearing about her loss this week, it was really just a real joy just watching her in this, because it was just, man, was she just fantastic.
Fantastic.
She was just great. She's a legend.
It was great seeing her in both of the roles that she played in this show that were 2 very different characters, and seeing that versatility, which is not something that typically happens in a sitcom. And I think the Edwina Nutt character only appears in the pilot and not in the future episodes of this show. So I don't think they continued that. I think they just kept her on in the Ms. Frick role. But it was really cool to get to see her do both of those things and really stretch her legs creatively in those roles. I mean,
oh yeah. There's not even if you're not specifically looking for it, you could easily miss that it was the same actress.
Yeah.
They share scenes together.
Yeah. But it just shows how incredibly versatile she was as a performer. She really could do any tone and any style of performance, anything as stupid or irreverent or emotional or dramatic as a story called for.
So I ended up watching episode 3, mostly because I wanted to see if it was different stylistically from the pilot. Because keeping in mind that the pilot ended the way that a movie ends and felt like something that was concluding rather than the start of something, I really wanted to just see how that then translated into an ongoing series afterwards. episode 3 has more traditionally sitcom-y opening titles and opening music. But apart from those credits, it is stylistically exactly the same as the pilot. There are a couple of casting choices that went a bit of a different way for some smaller characters, but overall, the main cast is unchanged and the style of the show is unchanged. In fact, it opens with a massive sight gag of a taxi cab crash in front of the hotel that causes a tire to go flying and goes flying through the lobby of the hotel, bouncing across the lobby until it like goes into the elevator and I think smashes a character into the wall of the elevator.
Naturally.
Yeah,
right
as in life.
Yeah, naturally. So right off the bat, it's the same big sets, the same single cam style, the same constant non sequitur gags, and predominantly the same cast. I'm not going to go into detail on the plot of episode 3, but I will say that the story mostly centers around this INS guy who has come barging into the hotel looking to see if they have any illegal aliens working for them so that those people can be rounded up and deported.
Oh, dear.
And from there, it goes through gags about how, you know, I mentioned before, there's something about some Japanese workers there. I don't know if the implication is that they are there legally or not. I don't really care. Where the plot eventually lands as the sort of main target of this INS investigation is actually Ms. Frick, because as it turns out, she does not have a green card and has been living and working illegally in the United States for several decades since soon after the Second World War. She came from Germany by way of Switzerland or something like that. So the INS guy demands to see her papers, and she doesn't have any, and they claim that they're just like somewhere else and that she's going to get them and he's going to come back. So they basically have like a ticking clock sort of plot, may call it 24 hours, to figure out how to keep her in America. And where they go, which would be typical of this type of plot, is that if she marries an American, then she can stay. So where it goes is that Reginald Tarkington is going to marry Ms. Frick, and thus they'll be able to keep her at the hotel. And so there's a whole back and forth thing about her trying to convince him to go through with this. And it was sort of touched on in the pilot that maybe she has like a crush on him, or there's some sort of past romantic thing going on there. And so he doesn't want to do this, but he's eventually convinced. And it becomes an episode where the climax of the episode is they get married.
Wow.
And it's a dumb marriage scene that definitely takes the award for worst marriage early on in a sitcom away from Townies.
Oh, I'm just happy that they got married. I'm actually
you were rooting for those kids.
Yeah. I was rooting for Miss Frick.
Yeah.
So Barry, I'm a network executive in the 1980s, and you're a producer. Pitch me the Nutt House.
Hey, Aaron.
Yeah.
Man, did I have a wild night. I gotta tell you all about it.
Go on.
So I went out drinking, right? I went out drinking with Mel Brooks. You know Mel Brooks, he's a Hollywood legend.
Of course.
And I tell you, man, we just got to talking. We got to talking all night, and oh, man, did we have quite a night. And here's the weirdest part about it. He left a half-finished screenplay in my apartment.
Oh, what's it about?
Well, it's about, a wacky hotel being run by, a bunch of crazy Mel Brooks type characters. It's half finished, but I think we can just kind of shoot it and see if it works.
Okay, so you want to, try to finish this movie?
Yeah, whatever. A movie, a TV show. It's like 48 pages. It'll fill some time, right?
Let's do it.
All right.
Okay, so what's everyone's final thought about this show?
My final thoughts on it, it's a complete stupid mess. And, I got some Mel Brooks chuckles out of it, and that was enough for me.
When we were in film school critiquing each other's work, if someone didn't quite like something, they would often say, it was well shot. Well, this was very well shot.
Yeah, it just reinforced for me how much I want to watch Cloris Leachman on screen.
Yeah. Everybody just go watch Young Frankenstein.
Totally agree with that. Yes. And cut to credits. That was a show. is a production of Radio Gizmo. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and follow us on Instagram for info about upcoming episodes. If you enjoyed the show, tell your friends about it.
Next time on That Was a Show.
So what were your first reactions?
A whole show based around job-shaming people who make deliveries. Cool.
I mean, the soundtrack was awesome.
I was like, yeah, I forgot that I kind of liked REM.
Radio Gizmo.